They told us the beacon was dead. That was the official word from the Carath Survey Authority when they signed off on decommission papers for Station Venn 7. The relay buoy had gone dark 9 years ago, and 9 years of silence was as dead as anything gets in deep space. Our crew, 6 salvagers, a structural tech and me, were out there to strip it. Pull the signal housing, bag the transit coils, cut the anchor tethers, and let the hull drift to a retrieval orbit where a hauler would collect the pieces in 8 months. 3 weeks of work, maybe 4. Routine. I have been loading and unloading cargo since I was 22. 30 years of holds and transfer bays and manifest tallies. My mother did the same work before me, on the inter-system freight runs out of the Oreth terminal. Her mother did it before her, on the colony supply lines before those routes even had proper names. We are not a family of engineers or scholars. We know how to move things from one place to another without breaking them, and we know how to read a hold's weight by the sound the deck makes under our boots. That is what we are. That is all we are. Station Venn 7 was a relay buoy of the old pattern. A fat ellipsoidal hull, pale composite over a basalt aggregate core, about 40 meters end to end. It had been anchored at this coordinate for 912 years, which was longer than the Survey Authority had existed, longer than the colony lines it once served. Someone had built it before all of that, and no one knew exactly who. The construction registry listed a contractor designation that cross-referenced to an organization with no surviving records. Old work, good work. The hull showed 9 centuries of micro-impact scarring and the faint chemical bloom of long exposure to the local star's output, but the structure was sound. The beacon's transmitter core sat at the geometric center of the hull, a smooth, pale composite column about chest height, anchored to the deck by 4 basalt alloy struts. No markings. No manufacturer's plate. The Survey Authority had tagged it with a yellow sticker that read, Inert/Category 4/Removal Authorized. And someone had drawn a small arrow pointing at the sticker, as if the column might not otherwise know the assessment applied to it. I noticed the column on my first walkthrough of the interior, 4 days into the job. Noticed it the way you notice something that is in the wrong place. Not wrong for the room, but wrong in some harder-to-name way. Like a word you've read so many times it stops looking like itself. I stood in front of it for a moment longer than I needed to. Then I went back to my manifest and thought nothing more of it. My habit with machines, and it is a habit, not a ritual, not a superstition, just a habit, is to rest my palm flat on the housing before I begin work near it. My mother did it. She said her mother did it too, though she couldn't say why either of them started. Something about reading the machine through your hand before you trust your weight to it. Vibration, temperature, the particular stillness of a thing that has been off for a long time versus a thing that is about to fail. Cargo workers develop their own languages with equipment. This was ours. On the 9th day, I was moving a survey case past the transmitter column, and I put my palm flat on its surface, the way I always do on anything that size and shape, just in passing. The column was warm. Not ambient warm. Not the residual warmth of a hull that has been processing recycled air for 9 days since we cracked the entry hatch. Warm the way a living thing is warm. A directed warmth, moving upward through my palm and into the bones of my wrist. I stopped. I did not pull my hand away, because there was nothing alarming about it. It was the least alarming sensation I had felt in years. It felt like being recognized. The sound came next, except it was not sound. It was pressure, arriving through my sternum, the way deep bass notes arrive through a ship's hull when the drive is running below threshold. Not heard, felt. One long, even pulse, then a second. Then the column's surface changed under my palm, not structurally, not cracking or shifting, but the quality of the composite itself altered, the way very cold glass changes quality when it begins to warm. Something that had been inert for 9 years was drawing current from somewhere, and doing it quietly, the way a careful thing wakes up. I stood there with my palm flat on the surface, and did not call for the others. I don't know why. I think I understood, in some part of myself below the part that reasons about things, that whatever was happening to me specifically, that it had been waiting for my specific hand. The pulse in my sternum steadied. It became a tone, not musical, not mechanical, A tone the way a voice is a tone, before the words separate from it, and then the words separated. They did not come through the air, they came through the bones of my hand, up my forearm, through my shoulder, and into the column of my throat, arriving in my body, the way memory arrives, already present, already known, already yours. Transmitted true, first signal. I stood for a long time after that. I have thought about it since, all of it, the whole chain of it. And the thing that keeps arriving in my mind is this. They did not build this beacon to transmit to other stations, or to alien civilizations, or to whatever authority would come along and authorize its decommission 900 years later. They built it to transmit to a person, specifically. They had seeded something into the cargo handling lines, into the loading and unloading of the supply runs, into the flat palm habit that my mother's mother's mother carried and passed without explanation, because the explanation would have meant nothing in any one generation, and everything across all of them. The signal was never dead. The beacon was never inert. Category 4 is what you call a thing you cannot read with any instrument you currently possess. The survey authority's instruments could not read this signal because the signal was never meant for instruments. It was meant for a body that had been prepared across 300 years of ordinary work to receive it, prepared not by any deliberate training, not by ceremony or education or conscious inheritance, but by the simplest possible mechanism, a habit, passed hand to hand, that kept the lineage calibrated to the exact resonance the builders had locked into the transmitter core 9 centuries ago. My grandmother loaded freight on the colony lines. My mother loaded freight on the Orath terminal runs. I have loaded freight on 17 postings across 4 systems. None of us knew what we were. None of us were asked to know. We were only asked to keep our hands flat on the machines before we began. That was enough. Across 9 centuries and every gap between us, it was enough. I told the crew that the beacon had exhibited an anomalous thermal reading and recommended we hold deconstruction pending survey authority review. I filed the report myself, using language that would produce delay without alarm. The beacon needed time, and I needed to understand what it had transmitted. Not the 5 words I had already received, but what they meant in full. The builders had seeded a lineage. They had also, I suspected, seeded an archive. The 5 words were not the message, they were the handshake. The opening of a channel that had been waiting, patient and warm at its core, for the right hand to lay itself flat and stay. The crew grumbled about the delay. The structural tech told me thermal anomalies in Category 4 equipment were reclassification events, not hold events, and that if I wanted a reclassification, I needed to flag it through the authority's technical review board, which had a 4 to 6 month backlog. I told him I was aware of the process. I did not tell him that I had already gone back to the column twice that evening, alone, with my palm flat on its surface, listening with my sternum to what it was choosing to say next. I did not tell him what it felt like to stand in front of a machine that had been built 9 centuries ago by people who had decided, for reasons I was only beginning to understand, that the most important thing they could transmit across all that time was not a weapon, not a warning, not a map, but a signal of recognition, addressed to no title, no rank, no extraordinary heritage. Addressed to a cargo handler, because a cargo handler would always be there, because a cargo handler would always rest her palm flat on the housing before she began. They knew us that well. They planned that far ahead. They trusted the habit more than they trusted anything else. I am still learning what that means, but I know this much. The beacon is not dead. It has been the most alive thing in this system for 900 years. It was simply waiting for someone who already spoke its language without knowing she did. I put my palm flat on the column every morning now, before I begin. It answers every time.